Oh, look at you. Festive as always.
Christmas month. It is the season to be jolly. John, wake up and deliver.
Oh, it's awake? We're awake. We'll be
We're
delivering.
awake.
We'll be delivering, yeah.
We are delivering on this fine and beautiful Monday morning. Season 2, episode 47. We're rocking it, John.
Yeah, almost another year down.
Almost another year down. As always, we got to wake John up. He didn't have any great topics beforehand. I said I'll get him going.
That's true. This week, like, honestly feels a bit blah.
I mean, it's December. Everybody wants to just freaking take a break. I think everybody got beat up in 2025. They look at 2026. They're going, I'm still going to get beat up. What am I going to do? So, without further ado, your reputation isn't what you shout, it's what people whisper.
Yeah. I mean, pretty tantamount to what, people say. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room, so to speak, or whatever.
Yeah.
Very, very famous frame as well. I think probably what's an interesting add-on to this, though, is when you handle people saying things that may not be true or were true in a certain context. I think that's what's interesting, because very often people don't spend enough time understanding why someone thinks they do or what had them thinking about a situation or something the way that they do. They just figure, oh, that's wrong, right? Broadly speaking, that's either wrong or that's not right, or it doesn't match my opinion, and like move on, as opposed to appreciating the fact that there's probably something that has someone thinking that way, whether it's justified or not, but there's always something there.
Also, it's when someone defends you when you're not in the rooms too, is a big one. It's not that they whisper at you. When someone says something that is contrary to what is correct, they will defend you. Mm-hmm. On that note, John, what, if anything, did you want to go talk about before because I have to set something up? So
okay, you can set something up, but let's jump into something I saw late last week that I thought was kind of funny. Because I think some people will go, duh, and then they're not going to wonder, well, why would it not be like that by default? So Target released like a little bit of an announcement, let's just say, and they were saying that they're looking to shift a lot of their fulfillment. So Target is a retailer, obviously very known for its fulfill from store, right? They really did that more than anybody else, much more than Walmart. Obviously, their own play on e-com and getting the most out of their network. What they said last week, though, was that they were going to start to shift online fulfillment away from busy stores into less busy stores to actually speed up delivery. And, I think like right off the bat, people thinking about operations and stuff, they're like, well, duh, yeah. Like, why would you,
I could have told you that.
Like, yeah, I could have told you that and stuff like that. And I think the interesting thing, when you think of these kinds of things is like appreciating like what are the potential downfalls to that. And, because of the fact that like retail and e-commerce and all of these things are relatively tight margin businesses, or at least in a lot of products that do a lot of high volume, the kind of like those stable foundational products, moving your fulfillment to slower stores actually can create a lot of complexity for your inventory management, because it's like if the store itself doesn't have a great velocity, it doesn't have a lot of foot traffic, for example, you kind of end up losing some of the benefits. Yeah, you lose some of the benefits of turning that inventory very quickly and, kind of like making your whole cash cycle on that product much faster, because you don't have you don't have as much of a risk to trap or to isolate inventory in a place that, like, if it's not being sold online, it won't sell. So that's typically, and then if you have no foot traffic in the store, it's tantamount to just having a distribution center anyway. So it's like if you really want to try to get both, you want to ideally ship from these places where you can send in great amounts of inventory to be efficient, right? Like, when you're thinking about middle mile, when you're thinking about stocking up the store or whatever, you want to be able to send it in so it's efficient, and you'll make more money when all of that's efficient. But if the store is too slow and it doesn't sell, or if it's too far out of the way and the speed promise maybe for the e-com doesn't make sense without elevated costs, you're kind of stuck, because the thing is that you're trying to be in the right place at the right time with the right product for when the customer order it to hit all of those things. And not every one of those stores is going to check that box right off the bat. So I just thought it was kind of funny to put that out there, because to your point, I think a lot of people would immediately have the reaction of like, well, duh.
Oh, no. Yeah, but it's kind of counterintuitive, because you don't have that same efficiency at those stores, and less foot traffic. It must be less density. It must be in areas that are not as popular. Mm-hmm. Hence, the other e-commerce that goes with it is predisposed for that area as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So inventory will sit, as to your point. That's interesting. Well, did you have anything else before I kind of?
Well, that was one I had off the bat. I got another one if it makes sense later, but let's see what you got.
So last week, I know I invited you, but you weren't able to join us. But last week was a great event.
Yes, this is true.
The TTC, Toronto Transportation Club. It's the oldest transportation club in North America. 110th kind of get together, and there's over 1,000 people that attended this. Nice. And it is a fantastic event. And I feel like we don't talk enough about things that, logistics people do to get together and help promote. That's the incoming president, Peter from Left Lane. What I found very, very interesting, we brought a few of our customers to our table, because we had our table, and some of our customers from outside the industry were quite surprised how well put, how big, how well put together it was. And they're kind of comparing to their industry. Like they're like, no, this is very polished. This is a very nice event. You guys celebrate very nicely together. If it's a very nice community, even though we're all adversaries or competitors, there's a lot of working together on solutions. And that's one thing that Peter talked about, which I found very interesting, was, in our industry, you'll now find more often than not from in the past, where you have an LTL carrier, final mile carrier, a warehouse carrier, a broker, and all these different segments of the supply chain come together to provide a single solution to a customer, versus trying to be like, well, if I can't do it all, I'm not going to work with anybody. And you're seeing these partnerships and these quote unquote coalitions to better service and provide a better need for the customer, and have that niche by working together in there. And I thought that was a very good takeaway. And I wanted to hear your thoughts, John. Do you, from your perspective, from a shipper, from all your years, did you find that as you were getting to the end of that, in that career right now, that they're working more together, these other, would have been competitors in the past? Or is this something that is still kind of developing?
Oh, I think it is developing, but I think people are working more together than they ever had to, because I think for most businesses, they kind of realize that, logistics and sort of transportation, or, well, let's just say logistics in general. Actually, it's not just transportation, is pretty like, I don't know, unsexy to a certain degree. Like when you're thinking about investment, when you're thinking about VCs, when you're thinking about whatever, you have to do a lot of activity. Like you have to have a lot going on. I mean, I've joked with you before about like CH, for example, like CH Robinson, and just how high their revenue is, billions of dollars of revenue. And, they're taking a relatively small percentage of that actually becomes pure profit. So I think as people have had to be more competitive, as they've tried to sort of be more financially responsible, because I think that's probably been one of the biggest things that has changed a lot over the last 5 to 10 years, are logistics enterprises, no matter where they are in that space, becoming far more business savvy, cash conscious and aware, because you don't really have the runway to failure, if I can put it that way, that you might have used to in the past. Like, I'm sure you've known guys that have essentially had a bad business model, but had been able to outrun it for like way longer than you thought they would be able to. And
that's the funny thing that I kind of led to this kind of conversation too with some of the people I was having there. There's a lot of companies that were being called out on their loans in the last little bit, whether transportation 3PLs that were mismanaged and they're just falling apart because they didn't have the proper support. And then you're seeing a lot of the larger companies, whether it's Transforce or any of those larger 3PLs, they're starting to really focus on specific niches within their business and starting to shed all the ones that weren't making sense anymore. And they rather partner and put agents in those positions versus them taking it on, because it doesn't make sense for their business activity to kind of take that on. And I think you're starting to see that a lot with FedEx, with UPS, with DHL. And DHL kind of, I think, started that trend well before FedEx and UPS by shedding a lot of those.
I was going to say, well, like DHL pulled out in North America, which, I mean, if you think about it, was like wild. At least they pulled out for their, like, let's call it like a lot of their like non-express international, like kind of closing the loop type activity.
But they didn't pull out. They just use agents now. They said, hey, we're not going to build a whole network here. Mm-hmm. There's a network here. Let's rely on that. Give me a price. I'm going to have my product from Europe hit your location, and we're just going to have an integration, and it kind of works for them, right? Yeah. And I think you're starting to see a little bit of that more happening with other 3PLs. Do you think retailers would get to the same extent? Do you think, well, Amazon already has that relay network, but they're not going to work with. They're not going to start segregating out, but their agent model too, eventually that last mile, final mile on their own trucks, I don't think is going to work out as well as some of these agents that are regional, that have a little bit diverse density.
Yeah, I think
people are looking at different retailers for their products.
Yeah, I think probably what's a challenge is that, see, right now, a lot of retailers would be in similar areas, right? So similar areas, they can get similar service. Like, in some ways they are obviously getting benefits of collaborative retail, in the sense that whether they go with the nationals, whether they go with regional players or whatever, like the reality is they're not 100% owning that capacity, so to speak. Like it's not like it's their dedicated fleet. So they kind of get it a little bit on the delivery side. But I do think there's an opportunity to make that much, much stronger. And, Amazon, in my opinion, is starting to really quietly, and I've shared this a number of times over the last few weeks in different posts on, episodes that we've done, sneaking in like more and more features and more convenience, and kind of really stacking a lot of the services so they interplay amazingly well together. And I think that as that kind of pressure continues, you're going to see a different need, or there's like a different opportunity potentially to get product out. The short term, though, I think probably the biggest opportunity is more with these bigger retailers to still share warehousing space with very alike customers, because you'll get small brands or you'll get medium brands going into like a 3PL, or they expand out to another network area, and they'll kind of like be mixed in. But if it's a primary DC, or if they just have enough volume, very often the biggest retailers, the biggest labels that you see, have their own facilities, right? Who was it not that long ago? It was, I think, maybe DSV and Sephora that was really talking about a brand new facility, for example, that they were setting up or something like that. Like, yep. This whole facility. And it's like, you still would be better off to like make that a little bit bigger and bring in other people to offset the cost. Because the thing is that so much of the building has got like a fixed activity, fixed cost component to it. You know what I mean?
I do. But I find it very interesting that majority of companies will never do that. And I have an example in the Southern Ontario area, which is very heavy on produce with greenhouses, and they all ship to the same set of 10 customers. They all compete for the same set of 10 customers, and they all break it apart, and they don't send full truckloads. They all send LTL. Altogether, they can be very efficient by combining all that freight onto one truck and sending it there and having it dedicated. But every time I've talked to any of them, they all say the same thing. Well, I don't want my produce on the competition with the competition's truck. Like, who gets the tail? Who gets the nose? Why is mine on the nose? Why is mine in the middle?
Well, or who gets priority when there has to be a decision made?
Right. Like, who gets knocked off if we ship too much, or if it's too heavy, or any of those aspects of like who's the one that gets the kick? And I always found that interesting, because it's could be so much more efficient and better for the receiving customer overall, for their customer in that experience, than not. And then you see Loblaws taking this approach in a different segment, where they went, we want more of this. How can we achieve it? Let's create our own private fleet and force these customers to load our trucks. And take that product and be like, oh, we have efficiency. And I know a lot of customers have pushed back on the private fleet, because they're like, it's not as efficient, because they don't kind of treated the same way. But the idea is there, and there is that need in the network for a lot of these places, even more so, I think, in that final mile aspect. Because you know how many times I look out my window and I see, you know, the FedEx truck come, 2 minutes later the UPS truck comes, 4 minutes later the Amazon truck comes, 5 minutes later the Canada Post truck comes, and they're all coming, you know, to my house or to the
your
neighbor's
door,
house.
yeah, because you've ordered everything.
Because I've ordered everything, right? But you know what I'm trying to get at. Like all these different vendors are all coming, and the loss of efficiency, quote unquote, would have been far more effective if it went to a central location and then they said, "Hey, here's all the packages for Matt when it comes to that neighborhood."
I think, you know, I don't disagree. Obviously, I think that's very like the logisticians type mindset, and like, hey, this is how you can solve this problem. I think you do have some uniquely interesting business challenges though, because it's like, well, who makes the decisions? Who owns the customer? Who gets the recognition? Who gets the blame? And you know, I think who then also dominates the customer's mind share, because the truck through the neighborhood is obviously doing something, but it's also reminding that next customer that, hey, UPS might be the option, or FedEx or USPS or Canada Post or whoever might be the option that you want to use next time, or that you would pick it at the cart on checkout. That said, I do think it is also like a little bit of a holdover, that there just hasn't been a really great way to deal with it. Because I think it's pretty fair to say, if you went, let's say 20 years ago in retail, 25 years ago, whatever, you would have seen a lot more reality around the concept of like owning the customer. Like, I own their closet, I own their basket. Like, you know, they love me so much as a brand.
Yeah.
I think that is really not true today. And I think that it's only deteriorating more. Not to say that people aren't loyal to brands, but like, you can't have both things. And I think we've talked about this before, in the sense of like, you can't be constantly evolving and creating new options and creating new offers and having new brands to try to appeal to people's desire for diversity, well, then also thinking that they're still going to buy all the same stuff from you, and they'll spend a little bit more somewhere else. Like that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that the same amount of money, more or less, is there. And you know, it's just going to go to different places. It's just going to split differently.
I think it's interesting to note on that is that the great transfer of wealth hasn't occurred yet. They're slowly still progressing. What I mean by that is the 20-year-old something now, or 20 and younger, 25 and younger, they don't have as much hope. So the statistic I recently read was they're not as getting their driver's license as quickly as we were when we were younger. Because we were, as soon as I was 16, I'm getting a car.
Birthday morning,
right? And that's happening less because they're like, well, there's no point because I can't afford a car. There's no point because I can't get a house. There's no point, and then all these things stack for them. So the same thing is when it comes to the loyalty of purchasing the things. Like, we had this attachment, and maybe that's the way there's this, you know, push for us to be anti-materialistic as we get older. But it's more of less of that stuff and that loyalty, because we had that aspect of it. Like, I would go, most of my TVs in my house are Sony's because I had that brand loyalty. Sony's are solid. When you open it up, it's like Samsung components anyway, right?
Well, funny enough, I guess the question is like, you know, were you really ever really loyal to those brands because they were so good, or just because essentially the world was much more shut in and closed off, and you didn't really know the difference, right? Like, and didn't you and I maybe chat about this sometime last week, where we were talking about some of the trends that are coming out of the Middle East as a good example, just like in the sense that they show up on social now. They become something people start doing. I mean, Dubai chocolate is a funny example of something that just really blew up. And it's like, so were you really that into the brands that you used to be exposed to, or is it just because of the quality, or because of whatever, or just because like there was no other game in town, and you know, mass media was all done a certain way, you could only get certain things, newspaper, TV, for example, whatever. Whereas like these days,
dramatic effect.
I spilled the water everywhere. I'll clean that up after. But these days you get like, you know, the fact that everything's at your fingertips from everywhere all over the world, and something you didn't even know existed an hour ago can be something that you can get really into in the next day. So I just think it's like a real shift in terms of
So in that context, how does a logistics company, whether it's final mile, middle mile, warehouse, whatever, because back in the day, like you said, to your point, and I've heard people say this back 20, 30 years ago, they would go down because they wanted more produce loads, they wanted more produce carriers. They would get a billboard, they'll throw up a billboard and they'll be like, hey, you want produce loads, call Matt. And your phone would go off the hook because everybody's calling you, hey, I want more freight, because it was, like you said, there was no way of getting to it. Now there's so much diversity. How does one create that brand loyalty, you think, nowadays? Because you can't say all the carriers or all the customers on LinkedIn looking for 3PLs or logistics companies or trucking companies, but at the same time, they're not doing word of mouth either. So if you were a 20-something-year-old John starting off in logistics, you're at Walmart, they give you, hey, you're a planner. How would you determine which carriers to bring on board and to use? And what would you look for? And what would the first thing you do?
No, I mean the first thing is probably just calling out the fact that like I don't think that they're going to be going to some random like, ooh, I got to source carriers, right? I think you're already in the fact that they probably already have a pipeline, they probably already have a database, like everybody's that sent them stuff.
All those guys bankrupted. They're all gone.
They all bankrupted?
They're all gone. You got to start new. It went kaboomski. It's COVID 2.0. And
I still think if anyone can make, like, I still think that they're, you end up with a very normal situation. It's like, of course you can cold call, you can interview, you can do that. Like, I mean, no different when people are hiring. I think if you get a warm referral, I think if you can do something that bridges or sort of like brings together like that trust element so that it's a little bit easier to make the decision, I do think it matters for sure. I think these days, unfortunately, what you're probably seeing more often than not, the way that people will often move around organizations is that you're probably seeing a lot more carriers or service providers starting with one organization that someone else got exposed to while they were somewhere else. If I'm really honest, that's probably where the bulk of like new opportunity in any substantive way really comes from, because thinking you're going to cold call your way into Walmart, like, it's obviously not impossible. I think it's highly unlikely that for some reason you're just going to soar through the ranks and be given a lion's share of the freight that's just going to make your business. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But
at the same time, on the flip side, how difficult is it for a smaller CPG to be able to find that proper carrier that isn't going to take advantage of them or even give them the time of day because they are a smaller CPG?
Well, but that's a whole other thing though, because I think the problem with smaller organizations, see, when you're a big organization, you can get away with having like weak people to a certain degree. I know that's going to sound bad, but like you can get away with having weak people because you probably have strong process and you have strong recognition.
That's true.
You're going to get people that are serious that are going to go and solicit you because, Mickey Mouse Mike isn't going to try to go and solicit like, an Amazon internal move. He's not going to try to do stuff with Walmart, not going to try and do stuff with Target, whatever. So they can get away with it a little bit more. The big mistake, in my opinion, is the smaller companies that don't over-index or that don't put enough value or investment on the talent of the people, because in those organizations, in those situations, it will 100% make a big impact to have someone that actually understands your operations or your freight. Because honestly, you're probably too small to know it yourself.
It's funny because recently I had a phone call with an old friend, and they're in charge of a larger brand in Canada for transportation. Mm-hmm. And he goes to me, we kind of came to a plateau on our LTL, Matt. And you are an entrepreneur and you're dynamic and you seem to be growing. I said, I am growing. I don't seem to be.
Look at getting all zesty over there with him, eh? Well, yeah, okay.
And he goes, what am I missing? And funny enough, a lot of what you and I have talked about helped me kind of channel kind of the idea. And I said, the problem with a lot of you bigger brands like yourselves is that you guys want to be national, and you want to I want to be the best coast to coast carrier out there. And then you start stretching yourself thin across the network, and then you start having these pockets of inefficiency. And I said,
or failure,
or failure. So like, where's your biggest struggle? He goes, BC going back to Alberta, like I'm running half my trucks are half empty. I'm like, what's your solution? And he's like, well, I want to go on one of those services that fill in my freight because I provided automatic rating system for them. I'm like, well, that's not good, because if that rating system is a run to the bottom, right? And it's not going to be dynamically great, and it's not going to be dynamically like pricing for you. So it's going to be just filler. So you're going to have more activity for either the same amount of dollars that you're getting or less.
Well, and you're really increasing your complexity for a nominal boost in revenue, which inherently will end up being more expensive, right? Because people, like, I joke around, and I'm guilty of this, of being like, well, when you're moving boxes, it's kind of all the same. And I will defend that and say that that's true a lot of the time. But when you're dealing with different customers and different products, just not every delivery the same, not every warehouse expectation is the same, not every handoff is the same. And the people that try to treat it the same are very much, when you hear these stories of, like, there's a guy in a yard trying to drop a trailer and he's screaming at me to sign this paperwork because he wants to leave. You know what I mean?
Yep. And it's funny. And I had that kind of conversation, and they give a few tips of what to do. And then I had a similar conversation with someone else who was a smaller LTL brand. And they're like, hey, Matt, I really want to focus on this particular customer. I'm going, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I was thinking about, I forget, like, he was trying to get a cold caller to call these people. Call him, like, what are they specifically in your geographical area? He's like, yeah, I want to focus on small grocery people, right? I'm like, why don't you just go to them and have a conversation? Because the cold phone call won't be as good. The cold emails, like, that's what he said. He wanted email, like a solution. I said, no, that's going to work. You have a very specific niche. You're a small business owner. They're a small business owner. The best way is you got to get in front of them and have a conversation and sit down and talk to them and explain why your solution might be a little bit pricier, but it's going to be better because you've tried out the other guy's solutions and you know how the struggle of it is there.
Or sometimes it's even just putting yourself out there and saying, like, I think probably one of the biggest mistakes that everybody tries to make when they're selling service is just that, is that they're preoccupied with making the sale, and that just oozes off somebody. If someone, for example, if we run with this scenario of your friend, it's like, you're both local businesses, so to speak. You're both small businesses, whatever. Like, just go in there and say, hey, I have, sort of no intention today other than just giving you a little bit of a brief introduction. Wanted you to know we're in the area. These are the kinds of things that we're doing. And always happy to have a conversation, rather than trying to be like, like, sort of
let me
you got a load for me, you know what I mean? It's like,
let me move your freight.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's where often people make,
I got a pulse. You got freight. Let's get together, right?
What was that thing you said one time? Matt made a post a couple of years ago when we were really playing with different ways to mess with the algorithm and see what it would do. And I don't know, what did you say? It's like, I got a heartbeat and some rusty wheels or something like that. I remember I was just laughing. It was ridiculous.
Basically, it was like, I have a pulse and you have freight. Let's get together, because that's the way we sell. And it's not like, and then that's the other thing that was I found interesting, was the bigger brand was like, oh, we want to be consultants. We want to be consultants for your freight. I'm like, why? Like, who wants a consultant for their freight? Like, for bigger brands, especially if you want the Fortune 500, they already have the teams for all that.
Well, that exactly. It's like,
right, like, you're not going to be better than they are on it, because they know their own freight better than you are.
Actually, here's the real secret: is that even if you are better than them, they will not admit it.
Yeah, never.
Like, you know what I mean? Because, like, it's transportation managers to transportation directors to regional VPs to VP. Like to your point, there's a whole structure there. Like, when I was in the food industry, like, people are like, well, how come you guys would never, like, how come you would just never engage, like, on a cold call that way? It was like, I wasn't ever hurting for not knowing what I could do and when, and it's like, I was never hurting for options. You know what I mean? So someone coming in and being like, oh, we're going to be we're going to come in, we're going to give you all of our expertise and blah, blah, blah. It sounds like a lot like it's about you and what you think about yourself. You know what I mean?
And in the end, I think my mentor and one of my customers said it best. Like, in the end, not that he was demeaning what we were doing, but you're just moving from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. And you got to do that effectively, efficiently, and communicate about it. Right. And I think that's where a lot of brands forget about, is that communication aspect of it. It's like, well, I moved it. Great. Who knows? And not that. And then there's other ones that overdo it and it becomes just a white noise. Right. So there's that nice finesse of, how you communicate. Not that you communicated, is how effectively have you communicated, and has it met what is required. And not only that, when you have a bigger brand, you got to celebrate it with them, where don't wait for your yearly meeting with them. You got to be on top of it. Be like, hey, this month or this week, we've had 55 loads or 20 loads or 5 loads. We were successful on 5. These are the challenges that we saw from our perspective. These are the things that we would look out for to be a little bit better, to make sure that we deliver on time and per expectations, and be ahead of that conversation. Because if you're just delivering and waiting for that next load and just be like, I don't care, just give me the load, I just want to move it so I can make my move, I think you're missing the buck.
Well, for sure. And I know we're over time, so it's going to be my last comment on this. You can consider it my closing thoughts as well. But it's like, at the end of the day, you got to remember that, like, whenever you're selling a service, if you're in the warehouse and you're like, oh, well, we ship it out on time. Like, okay, that's your job. That's what they're paying for. Oh, we're going to store it. That's your job. Oh, I'm going to deliver on time. That's your job. I'm going to deliver in full. That's your job. Like, I'm going to deliver it to the right address. That's your job. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what the customer feels like they're already paying for. And, you can't just talk about high success metrics on what they already believe should be 100%. So, you do need to get into these conversations about, look, like, the reality is everyone's going to deliver your freight. Like, if we're not delivering your freight, like that, that's not going to last anyway. So let's not spend a ton of time talking about that. Good example, just using your situation, you do a lot of food. Okay, well, produce or fresh, especially, the delivery is one thing, but then there could be, hey, here's the types of things that we insist on when it comes to quality. Here's the type of process things that we do. Here's the carriers that we work with are actually willing to do X, Y, and Z because they understand it's a requirement of this industry, right? The delivery is a given. Oh, we have the best rates. Like, okay, everyone says they have the best rates. And we have, the coverage. Everyone says they have coverage. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you got to appreciate the fact that, like, the basics are what everyone is paying for, so to speak. And we know, like, as operators, how hard it can be to do that day in and day out at that level. But it still doesn't change the fact that, like, people essentially believe they should be getting 100% for what they pay for. They tolerate a certain degree of error. But at the end of the day, every one of them would say that, yeah, realistically, I should get 100%, on time delivery, or full, in full delivery, or undamaged delivery, or whatever you want to put in there.
I'll just add one comment, because you just brought this out of me, and I need to say it now. Oh. It's like, if you go on any logistics providers, whatever, where they are, all of them are the leading brand in their area of that product. I am the leading final mile. I am the leading warehouse. I am Canada's number one transportation company, and it's all biased, right? Like, it's their own subjective idea. Like, I am the best at cold storage, because there's no way to verify that, and that's the bit of the challenge.
Everyone's the best.
Everybody's the best, but they can't deliver from point A to point B correctly.
Exactly. Yeah. On
that note, we shall leave a little bit late today, because we got hot and heated.
But you guys got some gold about how to sell. So happy holidays. I don't want to say that. Happy holidays. There you go.
On that note, we'll catch you guys next week. Same dock, same channel, same warehouse, same everything. Have a great one.